Yeah, so thank you for having me back. I was talking to the PMHP about 2 weeks ago, more about our counselling work. So I was really asked to just present an overview of CASE. Hi. But I thought, again, just apologies for those who heard the PMHP talk, for some of the things I might repeat, but just to kind of frame what CASE is about and what I'm about. The way the organisation started was really as a result of my struggle with psychology and what I was being taught at UCT, and really battling with a lot of the theory and the application of the theory in terms of what the kind of environment that I grew up in and how I understood or was trying to understand a lot of the community problems, and specifically around trauma and violence, which was my area of interest and my passion. So some of the biggest kind of challenges and things I was arguing and grappling about was around the diagnosis of PTSD. And in the early days of working, my early days of working, I really struggled to actually accurately diagnose people with trauma because I didn't feel like I was seeing a lot of PTSD, but I did feel that a lot of people were traumatized. So about 12 years ago, a friend and I, Sarah Crawford, started writing about continuous trauma and trying to understand the impact of what was going on with our clients at that stage. And I think through working at the TRC and at the Trauma Centre, I really felt very strongly that there was so much trauma in our country that was not being dealt with, and it worried me that, what the cumulative impact was going to be over the future generations. So, so initially, coming out of UCT, I ended up rejecting a whole lot of theory. But I think in the last few years, I've come full circle and realized less arrogance, there's actually a lot of value in it. And that I've actually ended up working quite clinically in a community setting, because you actually have to have your diagnostic skills, you have to understand psychodynamic theory, to understand group processes and the individual. So it's been a great way to kind of marry the two areas of work. But I needed to start CASE in order to find my way of doing that. So CASE stands for Community Action Towards a Safer Environment. And just briefly before I give you the overview of CASE, I want to fit in some time to just show you a 9-minute clip so you get more of a feel for the people, because I think that's more important than me talking. But some of the things that I was trying to understand around conceptualizing continuous trauma for myself and for the way CASE needed to work was that when we're talking about the impacts of continuous trauma, and I'm not going to go into all the impacts because that's a whole two-hour talk, but what I'm referring to is the impact, the systemic impact of living in a violent neighborhood where there's nothing post about the trauma, it's ongoing and continuous, and that people are experiencing violence from a very early age, that they're also experiencing multiple incidences of violence. So when a child is referred by a teacher to us for aggressive behavior in class, once we start talking, we discover the child is being physically abused at home, the father's in prison because he stabbed the mother, he's experienced gang violence, he's seen dead bodies in the street, and so on and so on and so on. And that was a case we had on Wednesday, one of many. But also that these kids have to, and these people have to recover in an environment where there's still ongoing threat. So challenges around how we do that, because most of the literature is about recovering when you're safe, whether it's post-war, post-conflict, whatever the situation is. And then also trying to frame what resilience is. And there was another word that really jarred with me when I was working in the early part of my career, that I found that a lot of mental health professionals were using the word resilience, but I felt that, if you look at the people, it's not resilience that we're seeing. We're actually seeing more of a negative resilience. People appear to be bouncing back. They're not coming forward. They're not presenting with PTSD. But yet, the behavior has been quite maladaptive, really. So trying to understand the multi-dimensions of what resilience is and what real resilience is. And then, obviously, the cycle of violence, contexts like Nova Park, Lavender Hill. I mean, Nova Park's not unique, but there are a lot of socioeconomic issues that interplay with trauma, and it's very hard to separate those. So I think the biggest thing for me that cuts across my understanding of the impact of continuous trauma is that there's this disconnection. And I'm not saying dissociation because I don't think it's the same thing. And what's been interesting for me is in the last 3 years to try and understand a bit more about what's going on neurologically. It's very scary to say that with Dad standing in the room. But to try and understand how trauma impacts the brain and what the adaptations are in terms of children's ability to function emotionally, learn in school. And for me, what I've been able to see is because of the kind of fight, flight, freeze response, the severe disconnection that happens physically, psychologically, emotionally, cognitively, in a lot of people, and how that impacts the family situation and relationships, how schools are functioning, and what's going on in the broader community. And I mean, there are lots of different theories about that, but for me, I think this helped me to frame how I understand what's going on in Hanover Park and with the people that we work with. So, one of the, also in terms of engaging with the community very early on in around 2000, 2001, we got a lot of community members together and teachers and principals and tried to understand together what we thought were the systemic causes and effects of violence in the Hanover Park community. And I mean, I had my ideas in my head, but it was very good to hear what were priority areas and how people viewed their problems themselves. So again, for me, it was the impact of this individual continuous trauma, for lack of a better word, that was impacting people, but then also the kind of problems within the family dysfunction, in the schooling systems, the stress that teachers were under, and then the community issues around the overcrowded housing, the gang activity, the substance abuse, and so on. And then our history, which was also very critical for us to understand and incorporate. So, the kind of impact of collective trauma and generational trauma beyond apartheid. So to kind of be thinking about that so that whatever we're doing, it's framed in an understanding that is ecological. So out of all of this, a case was developed, and our mission is to break the cycle of crime and violence through giving community members the skills and the tools to firstly understand and cope with their own trauma, so that they go through a process of their own healing, and then helping them to respond to the causes and the effects of crime and violence in their own communities. I don't think I need to give you too much an overview about Hanover Park. I think we all know the context. It's a very violent community. There are lots of huge socio-economic problems, and with, there's always a dualism that exists in everywhere. So with all the bad, there's also a lot of good. But I think in the last 2 years, especially, we've had heightened gang warfare towards the end of last year and from March, April this year. So a number of people have been killed. They've been shootings. Rivka, my assistant, works with me in Hanover Park as well, and we've been hearing shootings every day pretty much since we've been there in the last few months. So the situation is quite dire. One of my past interns who did a research master's at UCT, I asked her to do some violence exposure research for us, so we could get a clearer picture of what some of the kids were actually exposed to. And I think a lot of my concern with research and related to my understanding of continuous trauma is that it's actually very hard to get this research because people don't want to talk about this stuff. So, I know someone else is trying to do her PhD, but unless you're actually in the context and you know the full story of what's going on, you're not actually going to get the real information. So she could be talking to someone and the person could give their whole life story, but because we know the people, we can say, but she didn't talk about the fact that her husband was shot 16 times 2 years ago. That was kind of glossed over or not even mentioned, but it's a significant trauma. But so for this research, I asked that our youth leaders, 10 of our youth leaders, be trained as research assistants, and that they actually conduct the research with grade 7 learners. So although they are not cited, they were very much part of the research. So in the community, they saw that a lot of the grade 7s, heard 95% heard gunshots in the streets, high rate of witnessing violence, within the family, which I think is also quite, reduced in terms of reporting incidences, but more than half being beaten at home. And in the school environment, experiencing threats of violence at school, 38% being beaten up at school. And this obviously escalates during times when, the gangs are really waging a serious war, because gangs come onto the school and start targeting kids as well. So CASE seeks to achieve its mission through our 3 programs that are integrated. The first is the Training and Personal Development Program, our Community Development Program, and our Research and Advocacy Program. The Training and Personal Development Program is firstly where we are equipping community members so that they really understand what is going on for themselves and make sense of their own behaviors and their emotions. So a lot of the people that we get in our training often don't realize that they are traumatized, or they haven't actually made the link between their behavior and emotion and their life story. So helping them to understand that and helping to gain insight into their behavior and other people's behavior, and most importantly of all, to create empathy so that they start to feel again, start to feel human beings again, so we can get people at the end of the day looking at a gangster and understanding why that gangster is the way he is. He's not just a criminal, he's also a victim, and thinking in that way. And then also to empower them with specific skills, soft skills, because that's our area of expertise, and then creating support for them so that they can do the work in the community. So within in this program, we train counsellors after everyone has been through a personal development process. Everyone in CASE has to go through that process. And then we recruit specific people that we see would be good to work in some of our community projects. So we train counsellors, mentors, facilitators, and project managers. So again, especially in terms of personal development processes and the counselling process, although you're giving them tools as well, it is quite a healing process for them. Everything is done in the form of group, so that it creates social cohesion, and there's a lot of social support that continues to exist outside of the training. The same with our youth leaders. We recruit young people from the 3 high schools, and we train them as leaders and take them through a process of life skills and leadership as well. And they stay in the program for a minimum of a year, but many of them stay on and continue with us. And then our men's program, which is an area I'm probably most proud of, besides counselling. But obviously the community identified for themselves that absent fathers was a huge issue for them, and the lack of visible positive role models. There are positive role models, but they're pretty silent. So we have 11 elders that we've trained, who've been in the program for about 4 years, who mentor other men, and I'll talk about what else they do. But for me, working with the men is a significant way of actually doing prevention when we talk about violence, because there has been a lot of work done with women, we know this, and I think there's been a shift in people talking more about men's issues, masculinity and violence. And for us, this was really key, because they are the ones who are the victims. The men are the ones who die, the majority of people who die, and they're also the perpetrators. And the shifts that we see in men are phenomenal, and the way they actually have a ripple effect on their own families, their neighbours, their street, and so on. And then everyone who is recruited into the program commits to being involved in one of our community projects for the long term. And when they do that, then we continue to give them ongoing supervision for the counsellors, mentoring. They get ongoing training, because unfortunately and fortunately, once you start training people, they want more and more and more. So remember that for your for your program as well. And because they start to feel like it's opening doors, insights, and they want to know, okay, so how do you deal with rape? Okay, well, tell me more about transactional analysis, whatever it is. So the hunger for knowledge is there, so you need to keep training. And then also, because they're living in this environment where the violence continues, they have to have ongoing psychosocial support. And again, because of my understanding of the kind of somatization around continuous trauma, the high rates of diabetes and heart problems, and gastrointestinal problems and so on, which I see as a major impact of chronic stress and trauma. And obviously it's made worse by terrible eating habits and lack of exercise and all of that. So with sports science, we've had an OptiFit program where they do aerobics twice a week, and they get their blood pressures checked and measured and weighed and all of that as well. So that's been very exciting, and we've opened that to the community, and I think there are about 38 people that come every week. And then I also supervise quite a lot of interns, largely around the counselling registration, because they seem to be quite a good fit for the kind of work we do. And then other people who want to get into masters, so they come and volunteer. But for all the interns, it's been great not just to have the capacity, but very good in terms of for lack of a better word, nation building, for community workers with very little formal employment to be teaching and these kind of postgraduate students, and to be engaging and getting to know and struggling together, because then they're forced to talk about issues around feeling guilty because they're more affluent and have more access to education, and Jewish interns forced to talk to Muslims about those kinds of issues. So it's been a really wonderful kind of learning experience as well around for both sides. But the interns definitely, all of them at the evaluations at the end of the year, really feel they can't go back to their lives the way it was after you see what kids have to go through living in this kind of community. And then, as I said, the people who are trained in the training and personal development work in our community development projects. And these projects were specifically decided upon with the community as key areas. So we have our counselling and life skills project, our Big Moms literacy project, which I wouldn't have put as a priority, but they said absolutely literacy is important. And again, that was an intuitive feeling from them, but now there's a lot of research around literacy and violence. The after school project, the men's mentoring project, and the youth in action project. So our counsellors deliver counselling in all of the 13 schools and at one police station. They run support groups in school and out of school. And they also take on a lot of classes in terms of life orientation. Also when teachers are absent or when there's strikes, or whatever the situation is, they will go in and use that opportunity to have a life skills workshop with the kids and consistently be interfacing with the children and the learners. I always say that I've learned a lot from the community in Nova Park, how to be a relevant psychologist and how to use my skills. And these kids, I love this picture because they were actually the first ones who taught me about TIC in the community. There's beautiful innocent faces, and I'd been to Cape Town Drug Counselling Centre through a workshop at Sanka, but they told me really on the ground what happens, how you smoke it, how they have to clean it away. So there's been a lot of real community learning. Some of the stuff you really don't want to know, but these kids have to live with it. The counsellors, also with our young adults, the older girl youth leaders, run a girl power camp for 100 grade 7 girls every year. And that's really because a lot of these girls don't have an opportunity to talk about issues around sexuality and going to high school and just general choices in life. And often we found when we started the girl power camps a few years ago, we found that it was the first time a lot of them were starting to talk about their own rapes and abuses. And this year's girl power camp, I think, when I went to go and visit them, they're usually in groups of about 7 to 10, and 4 of the 7 girls had all been shot or stabbed at some stage. So we've subsequently developed girl power clubs, which happen weekly with the adults mentoring process. Then our literacy group, which was has been also very exciting because of how I was observing and working with teachers and seeing how difficult it is for these kids to learn in this environment. So we found this program, which is developed by another woman called Marlene Rousseau, that really fitted with our model because it's about creating positive environments around reading and writing with a healthy adult role model. So for many of us who are privileged, we were all privileged enough to have parents who read us bedtime stories, had us on our laps, and we had books in the house. A lot of these kids don't have that. Many of the parents can't read, there's definitely no books in the house, maybe a huge flat screen TV and a mound of debt, but no books. So the big moms kind of play that role and get the kid, they're very physical with the kids, they play with the kids, they use a lot of right brain creative activities. So if they're working through Little Red Riding Hood, the kids can talk about the big bad wolf and who, related to the gang leader, the American leader, or the father who's the abuser in the household. So there's a strong emotional memory component as well. And we do it in the foundation phase because of also some of the research shows from grade 3, if kids still can't read or write, they could become more deviant. So our work is in grade 1 and 2, and it's been wonderful to see over a couple of years now. We entered our schools into the spelling bee for the first time, because we started spelling bees a few years ago. And 3 of our schools got to the provincial round, and 1 of our schools won the national round. So that was phenomenal. All credit to the big moms. But again, across all our programs, it's about developing this cohort of healthy, positive role models who are evidence of having gone through the struggles. They're still going through struggles, but they're making better choices with their lives. And in in our external evaluation a couple of years ago, one of the researchers came out and was all choked up, and she'd just been having a focus group with some of the kids from the literacy group, and she'd asked them what is one thing that they've learned in the literacy group. And this one 9-year-old boy said the most important thing he's learned from his big mom is how to be a good dad when he's a grown-up. And that's exactly what we're trying to create. And if they can learn to read at the same time, fantastic. Our after-school project, our youth leaders get involved here in running a lot of the activities under supervision of the adults. So we have half an hour of homework time, and we get a teacher per school to help with that. And then our youth leaders take over and do arts activities and sports and so on with the kids. And again, it's very important when kids are so often left unsupervised in the community. Again, our men, our 11 elders, have been mentoring a group of 45 men who've been coming weekly. And again, this has been a project that's been very, very hard to implement. It had a stop-start for the first 3 or 4 years. And then we had about 6 people who'd come consistently. And then having our coordinator, Stephen, involved has really made it flourish because he's physically there in the community. So when we have our evaluation quarterly meetings where the men have to bring their partners so we can hear the real story of what's going on at home, we've had over 100 people come to those and report back. And it's wonderful because it's a range of men, from the very super spiritual, religious Christian, can't do anything wrong, to the ones who've come out of drugs, out of gangs, out of prison. But the common element is that they understand that they actually all have been absent fathers, and they've never often realized that. So seeing their work has been really incredible. And they're actually the only group that has, because they've worked through so much of their own trauma, they have to confront their own fathering issues and violence and how they parent their children. But it's given them a space to be very creative, and they're actually our most creative group in the organization. So they churn out poetry, they formed a band, they do dramas. When they go to prison, they showcase all of their arts activities to do outreach there. So it's given them their space to get in touch with their more creative, softer sides. Yeah. But their actual work on the ground, their regular work, is about mentoring the older youth in the program, the boys. And then with the boys, they mentor our young warriors who, through our supervision and counselling, we've seen there was a trend of a lot of the grade 6s being just hated by the teachers, so permanently tossed out of class. And that there were a lot of kind of inappropriate sexual behaviours amongst grade 6 boys. So they started working with them. And then the same with our leaders, our youth in action leaders, who have to mentor other young people, and as I said, they actually run the programs for the kids after school. And we've got a very good relationship with Cape Nature Conservation, so we take a lot of the kids out of the community, and actually the men have been trained by Cape Nature Conservation to facilitate hikes, so we use that as part of our process. So we'll take groups of teachers or everyone in the CASE program, or we took a group of mothers for the first time on the mountain, and they do an overnight hike on the mountain and talk about some of the issues around their own trauma. This is the Young Warriors Circle, the young boys meet weekly. So the youth are pretty busy, and they also run 2 holiday clubs per year for the kids, especially again, otherwise these children would be left at home, largely unsupervised and probably without food. So I mean, I'll never remember the first time I ran a holiday club there, and I had a 6-year-old girl bring her 11-month baby, a sister, to the club, and we were supposed to be going to the beach that day. I don't know what I was thinking with 300 children, but you know, it's a space for them to come and to be children, because they so very infrequently have time to be children. But it's a space where the adult can then take the 11-month-old baby and they can just be a 6-year-old and play and have fun. And I mean, with our holiday clubs, it's actually very precious, because we always try and start our holiday clubs at about 10 o'clock just to give us time to organize things. But they will arrive there at 7:30 in the morning and they will wait. But they're just so desperate for engagement, especially this having healthy adults and fun youth that are actually also trying to do the right thing. And I think what's really important across our projects is that we always focused on the future, and that whatever we're doing now with any kid this age, we're trying to create a healthy parent for the future, for the next generation, so that they have developed nurturing families for the next generation of parents, and that's where of kids, and that's where we'll really see the impact, hopefully in our country, or at least in Anova Park. And then the final program is the research and advocacy program, which we've only kind of started to formulate in the last 2 to 3 years, but it developed again out of other people seeing the case work and wanting to understand how we manage to do what we do. We have a lot of our community workers out there if Sandparks wants to run a training with youth in Guguletu, we'll send our youth to go do the training. Or if Lavender Hill wants to start a men's group, we'll send our men to talk to them. And people see the impact in the changes and hearing their stories and what they're able to achieve and how they sound. And a lot of them have been quite psychologized in some ways. So they use a lot of that language, so they, and they know what they're talking about. They've kind of integrated it into who they are. But what also comes with being out there is it meant that we actually asked one of our funders for time to actually think, because we've been through all of this. We know we're doing good work, but actually when you're on the ground, you don't have time to process really. You know what your goal is, and you're also dealing with everyday crises. We were very grateful for funders to actually give us the space to actually sit and write down what we were doing, process it all, and now help us with our whole M&E strategy. But it kind of helped us to see what the gaps were, or the problems or things that we needed to work on, and also out of the external evaluation that was done by Inside Out. So from obviously challenges to the organisation, consistently funding, and that's going to always be a problem for any NGO. So that we needed to think more creatively about how we were going to sustain ourselves. And on the one hand, the knowledge, the expertise is in the community, so I'm not worried about the work not happening, but at the same time it's people's livelihoods, and people, there's a lot of poverty at the end of the day. People still need to eat. The other thing that we found was that we needed to find a common terminology. I had come with my psychobabble and had used that to train people, and people had used it in different ways. So within the organisation, we were, if a funder came and asked us what we were doing or what we were hoping to achieve, we'd be saying the same thing but in different ways, some more circuitous than others. And then when we were relating to funder wouldn't know what I was talking about, because I was talking as a psychologist and talking about optimal well-being and enhanced health and promoting wellness, and they were like, tell me your theory of change, and give me your logic framework. So, so we've been through that whole process, and I think we've got a common terminology now that funders at least understand, and that we feel comfortable with. So that was quite a process. It probably took about 2 years of talks and discussions, and then another challenge is maintaining the kind of our value of being a proactive organisation and not to succumb to crises, because there's consistent crises, and we see constantly how, you know, a shooting will happen and someone will die, and the government department will race in and cause complete chaos and turmoil and re-traumatize everyone, and then they disappear. And people will kind of echo time and say, what are you doing? Why aren't you, responding? Why don't you talk about the gangs? And that's not what we're about. Gangs have been part of the history forever, and we're not interested in targeting gangs. We're interested in targeting people. If they happen to be a gangster, if they happen to be a drug dealer, a bad parent, a good parent, that's who we'll work with. So trying to kind of keep our own integrity and stay true to what we know we're good at. But it's not easy, especially when you're struggling with funding. And then the fact that we're working, again, in an environment of ongoing risk which affects us all. And I mean, I know I have been feeling continuously traumatized, to some degree. And that but the fact that we kind of have a very good supportive structure in the organization. Even for me, I mean, I use this example when people ask me, is it safe? How do I feel? When I was robbed in Plumstead, and was outside my son's creche, I mean, the first thing I did was fetch him and go straight back to Nova Park, because that's where I felt safe. And it just, and just, on reflecting on it, like a month or two later, I realized, it crystallized for me that the safety is in the relationship, and it's like those people are also family to me, and that is what's important, and that can be created despite the shootings going on. And then, as I said, the monitoring and evaluation was a challenge from the beginning. I think we lost a lot of valuable information in the first few years, mostly because the counsellors at that time that I started with and we were working for free for 5 years. And I mean, a lot of them have stayed with me just until we got our first funding grant. So there was this ongoing, which continues, is the focusing on doing the work or recording it and the administration around it. And then also, if you're dealing with community workers who haven't fulfilled a lot of their schooling, administration is terrifying for them. So, it takes a long process to actually go through. At one stage I had to sit with each counsellor and go through like 6 months of cases to do stats and try and make forms as simple as possible. But I think we're getting there, and again, as I said, in the last 2 years, we've been developing a database so that we could track more of our clients. And also because we have, when we see a boy, for example, we might see another family through our family member through our men's program. He and his little sister might go to our after-school program. They might be taught by the counsellor in the life skills. So we're trying to track, where these kids are and how much of the program they're involved in, all their families. But it's been quite a process to get that going. And then there's just a mountain of qualitative data that we just don't know what to do with because we don't have time to sit and analyze it all. But it's there, and we've had students do specific kind of impact studies. I'm answering part of your questions, I hope. Some of the impact studies around specific projects. But again, the language people want to talk in is quantitative. So that is our challenge at the moment. But we're hoping by March next year we'll have a proper, for this year and next year, more clearer figures in terms of the impact. So that's where we're at the moment. And okay, I do want to show you this clip, so I'm just going to skip through all of this. But as I said, the biggest thing for me around cases work, and again, which is a battle with funders to understand, is that our vision is long-term. And for all of us, with the fact that our counsellors, again, in terms of measuring impact, all our community workers have been with us for years. With our youth leaders, we struggle to actually get rid of them. We have to ask them to leave at some point and make space for the new leaders coming in. having been there for a long time has meant that we've gained integrity and trust in the community, and because of that, more and more people are coming into the program. So seeing, in our high schools that the referrals are being done by other high school learners is fantastic, and so on. And that we're starting to see 3 generations in case. So, the grandchild has been seen, the mother has been, or the father has been seen, and there's a grandparent coming through different training courses or in the programs. So that is really exciting, and to capture it all is difficult. So help needed wherever. So I want to just show you this clip, but I think just to wrap up with one of the men's quotes in terms of what we're about. I've learned to break the cycle of violence and abuse. My father was an alcoholic and mother used to beat us. I now understand that my parents did this because this was the way that they were raised. And I'm so thankful that I have been able to break the cycle in my own family and raise my children differently. And I mean, that is really what it's about, breaking that cycle. And if you're interested to know more, there is a book on CASE, which was part of our reflective process, which explains things in more detail. So that is available as well. I'll show you the clip and then we can have some questions. So this was a clip that was done by